Teresa Martin was resting at her home in Chicago, Illinois. It was around 4 in the morning when her phone rang, the glow of the screen showing her daughter Kenneka's name. Kenneka, 19 years old, had gone out that night to celebrate her new job at a party held at the Crowne Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel. Feeling uneasy, Teresa answered the call, sensing that something wasn't right. Her instincts were confirmed when she didn't hear her daughter's voice on the other end, but instead, the nervous tone of one of Kenneka's friends. The friend asked if Kenneka had made it home. Teresa's heart skipped a beat. If Kenneka wasn't with her friends and hadn't returned home, where could she be? Overcome with worry, Teresa rushed to the hotel herself to search for her daughter. What had happened to Kenneka Jenkins? The truth would shock everyone. It all started on September 8, 2017, when Kenneka received the exciting news that she had secured a job at a nursing home. Eager to share her joy, she told her friends, who quickly convinced her that such news deserved a celebration. That evening, Kenneka borrowed her mother's car and left the house around 11:30 p.m. to attend a private party organized by her friends at the Crowne Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel near Rosemont, about a 50-minute drive from her home. The party was in room 126, and Kenneka arrived with her friends at 1:13 a.m. on Saturday. The atmosphere was lively, with loud music, alcohol, and a room filled with young people. Kenneka greeted her friends, who congratulated her on her new job. However, one of her friends sensed something wasn't quite right. Kenneka, who usually didn't drink alcohol, was swaying and acting strangely as she hugged her friends. Though the odd behavior stood out, no one made much of it since many were intoxicated. The night continued without incident, and Kenneka danced with her friends, refusing to partake in any of the drugs or marijuana being passed around. Still, her friends noticed that she didn't seem herself, behaving in a way that was very different from her usual lively demeanor. Normally, she loved to dance with passion, but that night, her movements were slow and unenthusiastic. She eventually sat down, her expression filled with sadness. As time passed, her friends decided it was time to leave. They left the room around 2:30 a.m., but as they were heading out, Kenneka stopped abruptly. She checked her pockets and realized she had left her phone in the room. Her friends went back to retrieve it, but when they returned, Kenneka was gone. The hotel hallway was eerily empty, dark and silent, like a scene from a horror movie. They searched everywhere, but it seemed as if Kenneka had vanished without a trace. Over an hour passed before they decided to call Teresa, Kenneka's mother, using her phone. They explained that they hadn't seen Kenneka since leaving the party, immediately sending Teresa into panic. Teresa contacted the hotel, but the staff seemed dismissive, assuming Kenneka was just another rebellious teen who would show up eventually. Desperate, Teresa arrived at the hotel around 5:30 a.m., only to face her first hurdle. The hotel refused to release surveillance footage without a formal police report. At 7:14 a.m., Teresa called the Rosemont Public Safety Department, but they advised her to wait a few more hours before filing a missing person report, suggesting that young people often return on their own. Frustrated and knowing something was terribly wrong, Teresa couldn't believe how lightly the situation was being handled. Hours went by with no sign of Kenneka. It wasn't until 12:46 p.m. on Saturday that her family were able to officially file a police report. Only then did hotel management notify their staff of Kenneka's disappearance, around 1:04 p.m. Teresa returned to the hotel by 6 p.m., determined not to waste any more time. They began knocking on every door in the hotel, asking guests if they had seen Kenneka. Their actions led a hotel employee to call 911 to stop the disturbance they were causing. Furious and desperate, Teresa was enraged that more effort was being put into keeping the guests calm rather than searching for her daughter. It took 4 more agonizing hours before police finally agreed to review the hotel's security footage. To everyone's shock, it appeared that Kenneka had never left the hotel. This raised many questions. If Kenneka hadn't slipped out unnoticed, she had to be somewhere inside the hotel. Footage from the common areas was reviewed, and finally, a disturbing image surfaced. Kenneka was seen at 3:20 a.m. walking near the reception, stumbling and swaying as if she were intoxicated. 5 minutes later, she was captured on camera wandering into the lower-level basement area and then toward the kitchen, where she disappeared from view. With this new information, authorities scoured the hotel, but no further clues surfaced. As the day wore on, the search seemed to lead nowhere until September 10th at 12:25 p.m., when a hotel employee made a horrifying discovery. Kenneka had been found inside a freezer, locked from the outside. She was lying face down, missing a shoe, with no apparent injuries aside from a small cut on her foot. Her family was devastated. They had imagined countless scenarios, but nothing as horrifying as this. The freezer, set at a temperature just above freezing, was located in an unused kitchen. It was unclear why the freezer had been operational, as the kitchen hadn't been in use. Despite the investigation, the security footage showed no one entering the freezer with Kenneka, and her family couldn't believe that she would have entered voluntarily. The mystery surrounding what truly happened that night would haunt everyone involved. The police began to dig into the final hours of Kenneka's life, focusing specifically on the party she attended. According to their report, the credit card used to book the hotel room for the party was fraudulent and linked to a criminal gang operating in the Chicago area. Despite rumors circulating about foul play involving dangerous individuals, authorities insisted there was no evidence to support these claims. What happened after the party remained unclear. Some witnesses claimed that Kenneka had left with unidentified individuals, while others said she went back to retrieve her phone from one of the hotel rooms. A month after her tragic death, the coroner's report concluded that Kenneka's death was accidental, caused by hypothermia due to the freezing temperatures in the hotel's walk-in freezer. Alcohol and a medication called topiramate were also found in her system. The combination of these substances may have amplified the effects of both, leading to hypothermia more quickly. Although topiramate is typically prescribed for epilepsy or migraines, Kenneka had never been prescribed this medication. There was also swelling in her brain, though this was not linked to the cause of her death. The police issued a statement confirming that while there were no signs of foul play, the investigation remained open. However, Kenneka's family refused to accept this conclusion, convinced that something more sinister had happened that night. They believed someone had harmed her, and they were frustrated by what they perceived as the police's reluctance to fully investigate the matter. The city of Chicago was shaken by the news of Kenneka's death. Protests were held outside the hotel where she was found, with many believing that hotel staff had failed to take her disappearance seriously and might even have been covering up what really happened. Online, theories about the case spread like wildfire. People questioned how Kenneka, who had barely been able to walk straight in the hotel hallway, could have had the strength to open the heavy freezer door. Further details from the forensic analysis only fueled speculation. Multiple bruises were found on Kenneka's body, raising questions about how she sustained them. If, as the official theory suggested, she had entered the freezer on her own, why was her body covered in bruises? Many people believe that Kenneka had fought for her life, trying to escape her fate in that cold, locked freezer. Adding to the mystery was a video Kenneka had posted earlier in the evening, showing her smiling and enjoying the night with a friend. Later, she posted a Facebook Live video from the party where she could be heard laughing and even jokingly saying, "Help me, help me." What started as harmless fun in the video turned into a chilling moment that would be viewed by over 4 million people, sparking a new theory on the internet. In the hours after her friends left her, the hotel security cameras captured Kenneka walking around with an unidentified group. She had told her friends she was heading to her car, but the footage showed her inside the hotel instead. Why had she lied? After this mysterious interaction, Kenneka disappeared from view for several hours, only to reappear on camera at 3:27 a.m., visibly disoriented and struggling to move. At that point, she could barely walk, relying on the walls and furniture to steady herself. Questions started swirling. Had she consumed something other than alcohol? Her friends and family knew Kenneka rarely drank, as she had a low tolerance for alcohol. Was she forced to drink, or had she been drugged without her knowledge? Another theory emerged, that one of the boys at the party had been infatuated with Kenneka, but she didn't reciprocate his feelings. This idea was strengthened by a live video recorded by one of her friends during the party. Some viewers claimed that if you looked closely, you could see Kenneka being assaulted by a group of boys on a bed in the background. According to this theory, the assault led to her death, and her body was placed in the freezer to cover up the crime. While no concrete evidence supported these claims, the mysterious and heartbreaking circumstances of Kenneka's death left many questions unanswered and fueled widespread debate about what truly happened that night. On social media, various theories emerged about what happened to Kenneka, including accusations against specific individuals. Among the rumors, some speculated that her friends had betrayed her for money, leading to an unfortunate series of events that ended in her death. It was even suggested that the hotel itself may have played a role in covering up the incident. Faced with these allegations, Kenneka's friends deactivated their Facebook pages due to the intense online backlash. One prevailing theory claimed that Kenneka had been lured to the party by a friend who had been paid to bring her, allowing others to take advantage of her while she was intoxicated. According to this rumor, the hotel's manager later kidnapped Kenneka and ended her life to harvest her organs for sale on the black market. This speculation was fueled by the fact that her body was found in a freezer, which was assumed to be used to preserve it. Additionally, surveillance footage from cameras near the freezer, which should have shown Kenneka entering, was reportedly malfunctioning. Adding to the suspicion, an organ donation center was located just 20 minutes from the hotel. Around the same time, the hotel was facing legal action from the family of a 23-year-old man whose body had been donated for medical research but was allegedly mishandled for profit. Though none of these theories were ever confirmed or taken seriously by authorities, many remained convinced that powerful and dangerous individuals were covering up the truth. Kenneka's mother shared her ongoing grief over losing her daughter, believing that someone was responsible for her death. Her family and friends criticized the police's initial response and filed a lawsuit against the hotel, a security company, and a restaurant, seeking over $50 million in compensation. The lawsuit claimed that neither hotel nor security staff reviewed the surveillance footage promptly, resulting in Kenneka's body being discovered 21 hours after she was last seen. The family argued that had the hotel monitored the security cameras properly, Kenneka's life might have been saved. The family's lawyer presented photos of the freezer door, arguing that it had been accidentally closed from the outside after Kenneka entered. He alleged that someone had noticed the open kitchen doors and shut them, unknowingly trapping Kenneka inside. This theory, however, contradicted the timeline laid out by the surveillance footage released by the Rosemont police, which showed that after Kenneka disappeared into the kitchen area, no one else entered the room until her body was discovered. So, the question remained, who had closed the freezer door? In response, the hotel released a statement saying, "Kenneka Jenkins' death was a tragedy, but the lawsuit is without merit, and we will vigorously defend against it." The family's lawyer countered that the hotel had the means to secure the kitchen area, which had locked doors, and that if the illegal party had been shut down earlier and security footage reviewed thoroughly, Kenneka's death could have been prevented. Ultimately, in December 2023, 6 years after the incident, the lawsuit was settled for $10 million due to negligence. Of the settlement, around $3.5 million was allocated to cover the attorney's fees. More than $6,000 went toward funeral expenses, and Kenneka's mother, Teresa Martin, received $3.7 million. Other family members were awarded $1.2 million and $1.5 million, respectively. To this day, the circumstances surrounding Kenneka Jenkins's death remain unclear. Neither witnesses nor the hotel's security footage have provided enough information to definitively explain how she ended up in that freezer. Whether it was an accident, a desperate attempt to escape, or something more sinister, Kenneka's death continues to raise questions. Who were the unidentified individuals seen with her that night? Did they try to intoxicate her for their own purposes, or did she drink on her own? Why was there no footage of the freezer area where she died? In her intoxicated state, was she able to open the heavy freezer doors by herself, or did she mistake it for something else, like an elevator? For many, the theory of organ trafficking remains a plausible explanation, especially given the growing issue of organ trade in the United States. Until the police can definitively confirm what really happened, all we can do is continue to speculate. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Ali Kostiel was born in St. Louis, Missouri, but she always dreamed of attending the University of Mississippi. When she finally got this opportunity, she felt like her life had reached its peak. However, things took a dark turn. Investigators noted that no clues or evidence could have alerted Ali's friends before her life was tragically cut short on that fateful July afternoon. Detectives arriving at the crime scene were baffled by how someone could commit such an act against a well-behaved, easygoing student. Their attention quickly turned to their prime suspect, another student with a hidden agenda that no one could have anticipated. Alexandria Costial was born on September 11, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her long name was quickly shortened to the affectionate nickname Allie, which is what her loved ones always called her. Allie was the daughter of Cindy and Keith Costial, and she had a younger brother named Andrew. From an early age, Allie showed a strong sense of responsibility towards her studies, coupled with her athletic talents. These attributes helped her excel as a standout student at high school. In addition to her academic success, Allie was an active cheerleader, part of the track and field team, the golf team, and a member of the National Honor Society. Her adventurous spirit also led her to volunteer in Peru and Africa, where she taught English to young children. Cindy and Keith were extremely proud of their daughter, as Allie's affection and light touched everyone around her. She loved animals and children, often working as a babysitter to earn some money, and her caring nature made her a favorite among families. Allie also enjoyed dog walking and was an enthusiast of yoga and half-marathon running. Her spiritual nature and constant smile made her approachable to everyone. During this period of her life, she formed a deep bond with Maddie Norris. The two became inseparable, sharing dreams and secrets in a way that felt like they had known each other in previous lives. Their friendship was more like a sisterhood, leading to many shared adventures. After graduating in 2016, Allie enrolled at the University of Mississippi to study business administration. She was thrilled to be part of an institution rich in tradition, history, and football. Her parents witnessed the excitement and joy this new chapter brought to her life. Allie also dreamed of meeting a charming Southern boy with whom she could one day start a family. Despite the distance, her friendship with Maddie remained as strong as ever. It was no surprise to her loved ones that Allie thrived not only academically but also socially. She quickly made new, meaningful friendships, including one with Elizabeth, whom she met at a campus party. They shared several common interests, which solidified their close bond. Among the new people in her life, one stood out as particularly special to Allie, driven by her innocent romantic aspirations. She set her sights on Brandon Thiesfeld, a young man just a year older than her from Fort Worth, Texas. Brandon was the son of Daniel Thiesfeld, a medical professional. Brandon enjoyed an idyllic childhood filled with love and all the comforts any child could wish for. Raised in a good Christian family, he had ample opportunities for outdoor activities like hunting and fishing in the vast Texan landscape. As he grew older, he also shone as a football player at his school. Like Allie, Brandon was a student at the University of Mississippi's business school. They shared mutual acquaintances and even attended some classes together. However, Brandon's temperament was quite different from Allie's. But as the saying goes, opposites attract. According to local records, Brandon was arrested in April 2017 for public intoxication and possessing a fake ID. This wasn't his only brush with the law. He was involved in another incident, though the Oxford Police Department later confirmed that the records of this case were expunged and sealed. Despite these isolated incidents and the generally good conduct Brandon displayed, there was someone who did not find him particularly likable and had reasons for such a perception. Rex Ravita, another student who lived in a dormitory across the hall from Brandon during their freshman year, frequently encountered him. Rex found Brandon's behavior objectionable, considering him a spoiled daddy's boy. According to Rex, Brandon often boasted about his father's wealth and how it could get him out of any trouble, which Rex found particularly annoying. Additionally, Rex had noticed another particularly unpleasant trait in Brandon. He often treated women in a degrading manner. One night, when Allie and Brandon crossed paths at a local bar, she felt an immediate attraction. It didn't take long for them to start dating occasionally, though Allie wished they spent more time together. She often brought him along as her date to most of her parties. However, to almost everyone observing their developing relationship, it was clear that Brandon wasn't as enamored with Allie as she was with him. Despite this, Allie seemed blinded by her initial impression and Brandon's good looks, never seeing through the facade. The evident disinterest from Brandon and his flaws, which were apparent to everyone else, went unnoticed by Allie. She was convinced she had found her dream man and envisioned a future with a home and family. As weeks and months passed, their relationship grew complicated. Around their second year in college, driven by her intense feelings, Allie sent Brandon numerous late-night texts while she was out partying, eager to chat with him. Without any explanation, he blocked her number. During this time, Maddie visited Oxford to see her friend and unofficial sister. Naturally, she was excited to meet the new man in Allie's life, but to her surprise, Brandon didn't show up. During that visit, Maddie became concerned about Brandon's clear detachment, despite the affection Allie lavished on him. Despite this, Allie seemed to be doing well in many other areas of her life. By her third year, she had formed a strong friendship with another university student named Morgan. It was around this time that Brandon inexplicably reappeared as if nothing had happened, seeking to reconnect with Allie. Allie interpreted this gesture as a sign of mutual romantic interest and became filled with hope. However, she was the only one who saw it that way. To everyone else, it was strange, knowing that Brandon had no genuine feelings for her. One of the most astonished by the situation was Rex. Upon learning about the supposed romance between Allie and Brandon, he believed that the young Texan was emotionally manipulating her, making her think he loved her, something Rex was sure was false. Deep down, Allie might have been aware of Brandon's lack of affection. This could explain why her closest friends and even her parents knew very little about him. References to Brandon and their relationship were quite vague. Consequently, none of Allie's close ones were aware of the emotional abuse she was experiencing. Allie often found herself in tears over the man she loved. Her roommate at the time occasionally noticed the sadness in Allie's eyes. However, as she mentioned in a later interview, Allie was a girl who radiated pure light and had the ability to appear happy even when she was sad. According to her, Allie's kindness blinded her to others' malice, making her see people as better than they actually were. In April 2019, Allie told Brandon that she was worried she might be pregnant and sent him a picture of a home pregnancy test. The results were inconclusive, but given the gravity of the situation, Allie expressed her desire to discuss it in person. Brandon's immediate response was like a cold shower. He bluntly stated he had no intention of staying with her if she was indeed pregnant. Over the next 3 months, Allie tried to meet with him to talk about it, but Brandon avoided her at all costs. Sometimes he would agree to meet and then cancel at the last minute. Other times, he simply wouldn't show up and offered no explanation afterward. Amid this emotional roller coaster, Allie continued with her life, hoping the situation would improve, and only communicated with Brandon electronically. Unbeknownst to her, Brandon was spending long hours trying to find a solution to what he saw as a major problem. He spent days researching online about medications and clinics for terminating a pregnancy. Unsatisfied with these options, he even considered more extreme scenarios, looking up how to use a weapon and hide a crime. In the midst of the uncertainty about their relationship status, the vacation period arrived. Allie decided not to travel back home to Missouri. Given that she was in her final year and had high academic ambitions, she chose to stay at the university in July to attend a summer course. Additionally, she was teaching fitness classes at the time, which motivated her to sacrifice her break to earn extra money for her expenses. However, Cindy and Keith were not willing to miss the opportunity to be with their daughter. They informed her that they would come to visit. Allie was overjoyed at the news. Once her parents arrived at her apartment, the three of them had the most wonderful days together. Allie and her mother went shopping and chatted endlessly about countless things. There was so much to catch up on that the hours seemed too short. Knowing Allie's love for the sea and the beach, Cindy gifted her several new items, all with a marine theme, to reflect her interests in her home. Allie, in turn, repeatedly asked her mother to cook her favorite dishes. When it was time to say goodbye in mid-July 2019, Allie wished her parents could stay for at least one more day. As Cindy and Keith headed back home, they comforted themselves with the thought that their next reunion was just around the corner and they just needed to be patient. Shortly after, Brandon contacted Allie via text message. Just as he had done previously, disappearing and reappearing months later as if nothing had happened, this time he requested a meeting to discuss the delicate matter in person. On Friday, July 19, 2019, back in St. Louis, Cindy called her daughter to confirm everything was all right. True to her word, Allie went to a bar that night. A while later, surveillance cameras captured her leaving the place, wearing a white shirt and blue shorts, with her head down, seemingly texting. The footage shows her in front of the door, though she doesn't enter the establishment. Afterward, Allie returned home but left again without her roommates hearing. Around midnight, she finally met up with Brandon. The details of what transpired next have been elusive to the authorities. No one knows what was said or the tone of their conversation. It's assumed there were accusations and clarifications, but this remains speculative. What is certain is that Allie and Brandon met face-to-face at a lake, a vast area surrounded by numerous campsites and recreational spaces. Due to its size and characteristics, the sheriff's department has long patrolled its various nooks and crannies. During the early hours of Saturday, July 20th, 2019, the moonlight was the only illumination for the patrolling officers. The prevailing darkness was far from romantic. According to police sources, a local resident walking their dog reported hearing gunshots in the early hours of that morning, between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. The attacker fled the scene. Around 10:30 a.m., a police investigator was on patrol, not expecting to discover the lifeless body of a young woman. The discovery occurred near an abandoned fishing camp, a remote location about 20 miles from the university. Overcoming the initial shock, the police officer was able to gather some general information about the victim. This experience marked a significant turning point in his career. Allie's purse, containing her school ID and driver's license, was found nearby shortly afterward. When the police department was notified, investigators began their efforts to uncover what had happened. They attempted to trace Allie's cell phone but were unsuccessful. Meanwhile, that Saturday, Brandon spent the day with friends, behaving as if it were any other day, showing no apparent signs of distress. They went bowling and chatted normally, with none of his friends noticing anything unusual. At some point between Saturday and Sunday, Brandon wrote a letter to his parents, revealing his anguish over his actions. Though he avoided explicitly mentioning the crime, he confessed to something terrible that would likely result in his imprisonment or death. He was certain that sooner or later the police would catch him. As investigators delved into Allie's social circle, Brandon emerged as a potential suspect. The team focused their efforts on trying to contact him, but all calls to his cell phone went unanswered. On Saturday afternoon, the police visited Allie's family to deliver the devastating news. The words hung in the air, creating a surreal sense that they were living a nightmare. Overwhelmed with grief, Cindy and Keith had to face an unimaginable reality. Allie's close friend Maddie struggled to make sense of what had happened, her mind flooded with memories of the time spent with the friend she considered a sister. Meanwhile, the police continued their attempts to reach Brandon. By then, he had left his friend's house and was driving his truck. Allie's cell phone remained missing. The news of the crime shocked the university community and local residents. However, due to the ongoing investigation, the police withheld further details. As a result, it was unclear whether the attacker had killed Allie at the lake or abandoned her there afterward. The same confusion surrounded the murder weapon and the connection between the victim and the perpetrator. This changed when investigators made a crucial discovery. In Allie's room, they found her smartwatch, which turned out to be an invaluable piece of evidence. The smartwatch allowed them to uncover some of the text messages exchanged between Allie and Brandon. Realizing the urgency, the team immediately tried to contact Brandon, who this time answered their call. He apologized for not responding earlier and made excuses to avoid meeting with the officers, but promised to come to the police department first thing on Monday, July 22nd. After hanging up, fully aware of his predicament, Brandon continued to travel as far as possible. On Sunday, July 21, 2019, he arrived at another friend's house carrying an unusual item, a firearm. He made no effort to hide it and even unloaded it in front of his host. Brandon also brought a six-pack of beer, so they sat down to drink, chat, and watch television. The next morning, he left without attending the scheduled meeting at the police department, thus becoming a fugitive. Detectives obtained an arrest warrant and began tracking Brandon's phone. Having left Mississippi, Brandon's location was soon identified as Memphis, Tennessee. Authorities issued an alert for his truck, which had a distinctive license plate. It didn't take long for the Memphis Fugitive Task Force to get a positive result. About an hour and a half later, the prime suspect, wearing a blood-stained shirt, was apprehended outside a gas station in the southwest part of the state. The operation involved at least 12 officers and 7 police patrols. Inside the vehicle, they found a firearm matching the one used in Allie's murder. Mississippi investigators were promptly notified. They headed north to pick up Brandon. Upon arrival, he found Brandon calm. He read him his rights and then transported the suspect back to Mississippi in custody. Once they reached the station, Brandon recounted his activities during the weekend of the crime, revealing that he had been roaming around Oxford from Friday to Saturday. Beyond that information, Brandon remained steadfast in his right to remain silent, refusing to provide further details to the investigators. He was detained at the county jail, and his family soon hired an attorney to handle his defense. In a statement, Brandon's father insisted that his son was not involved in the incident. He urged everyone to presume Brandon's innocence, confident that the ongoing investigation would reveal what he believed to be the truth. However, he was unprepared for what was to come. The first blow came when a university spokesperson confirmed that Brandon was suspended from the institution. Meanwhile, Allie's autopsy revealed that she was not pregnant at the time of her death, but this information was not shared with the media. Allie's funeral took place on Saturday, July 27, 2019. Friends, family, and community members left flowers and condolence notes. Despite their indescribable grief, they felt fortunate to have known such a vibrant and luminous young woman. In August of that year, Brandon was charged with first-degree murder. If found guilty, he could face the death penalty. His name made headlines. When Rex heard the news, he was initially shocked, but soon, everything seemed to make sense. He recalled all the rude and contemptuous comments Brandon had made about various women. For the prosecutors, the case became a textbook example of ignored warning signs in relationships that can lead to tragic endings. They believed that Allie's death could have been prevented. As the search for evidence continued, investigators discovered the letter Brandon had written during that weekend while searching his apartment. The COVID-19 pandemic delayed the start of the judicial process, requiring extra patience from Allie's friends and family. However, the investigators used this time to continue their work, sifting through hundreds of text messages between Allie and Brandon, a daunting task. Meanwhile, the prosecutors continued to build their case, gradually uncovering the details of an unequal love story. A series of facts, previously unknown to those close to the university student, came to light. When the case was finally presented to a grand jury in mid-2021, the evidence included photographs of the gun and bullet casings, as well as the letter. To the prosecutors, this letter was clearly a confession. However, the defense presented a completely different perspective. As Brandon pleaded not guilty, his lawyer argued that the letter was merely a farewell note, as Brandon had contemplated taking his own life at that time. To support this claim, the defense mentioned that Brandon himself had stated he was holding the gun to his head when he suddenly fainted. It was during this moment that the courtroom learned from Allie's autopsy report that she was not pregnant and had no evidence of ever having been pregnant. The revelation caused an unmistakable shock. The trial proceeded until, unexpectedly, in August 2021, just a week before the sentencing, Brandon chose to admit his responsibility for the crime. He and his legal team reached a plea agreement with the prosecution to avoid the death penalty. Instead, he received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, Brandon addressed Allie's family, apologizing for the immense pain he caused by taking their daughter's life. He acknowledged that his actions had permanently altered the lives of the Kostiel family and his own. He expressed a desire to turn back time and undo his actions, but knowing that was impossible, he sought forgiveness from God and hoped that one day they might find it in their hearts to forgive him. Following Brandon's statement, the victim impact statement was read aloud in court, delivered by Cindy, Allie's mother. In her letter, she expressed regret for not being able to keep her daughter away from Brandon, whom she described in stark terms as a monstrous, heartless, scheming, ungrateful, sinister, violent, and corrupt individual. Cindy also added that Brandon had every opportunity to do good in the world, but chose to do evil. Because of that choice, he would spend every day of the rest of his life in prison. She reminded everyone that it was an atrocious act he committed against a sweet soul like Allie, and predicted that every time the cell door slammed shut, it would be a reminder of what he did and the life he took. Those who knew Allie hold on to the certainty that the actions of her attacker will never extinguish the sweet light she brought into the world. On the contrary, they know that her spirit will live on through the lives she touched, as Allie always strived to make the world a better place with every step she took. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Sony Millbrook was born on February 15, 1981 in Memphis, Tennessee, USA. She was the daughter of Christine Millbrook Bennett and had two sisters and three brothers, along with a large extended family. This close-knit environment allowed her to forge a special bond with her cousin Jenny. As she entered her teenage years, Sony became a popular student at her high school. In 1998, at just 17 years old and in the 8th grade, she met a man in his 20s named Lakeith Moody, with whom she soon began a relationship. Unfortunately, Lakeith was abusive, and his violent behavior left visible marks on Sony's body. Despite their tumultuous relationship, they had 4 children together, 3 girls and a boy named after his father. In 1999, Sony's mother noticed a bruise on her daughter's chest, which Sony tearfully admitted was caused by Lakeith. One of her friends also observed injuries, but Sony refused to report him. Lakeith was controlling and often tried to isolate her from friends and family. That same year, Sony moved into an apartment in the Fraser neighborhood of Memphis. One day, the apartment management notified her of a disturbance at her home. When she arrived, she found her apartment in disarray, furniture slashed, clothes missing, the television destroyed, food smeared on the walls, and personal hygiene products scattered everywhere, including down the stairs. Written on the mirror in red nail polish was the message, "Kiki loves you," Kiki being Lakeith's nickname. On October 31, 2000, Sony, her cousin Pamela, and Lakeith were at a bar called Mirage. During their time there, Lakeith slapped Sony and threw a drink in her face. Sony and Pamela left the bar and sat in the car where, according to Pamela, Sony was shaking and trembling. She asked Pamela to take her home before Lakeith arrived. Once home, Sony secured the door with locks and chains. An hour later, Lakeith arrived, yelling and banging on the door. Pamela only managed to get Lakeith to leave when she threatened to call the police. Once Sony calmed down, her cousin left her alone at home. However, later that evening, Pamela received a call informing her that Sony was in the hospital. Somehow, Lakeith had gained entry to the house. When Sony tried to end the relationship, he retaliated by tearing her clothes and beating her on the head, face, chest, arms, and between her thighs. She ended up with bruises all over her body, a loose tooth, and even lost consciousness as Lakeith Moody had choked her until she passed out. Not long after, Lakeith Moody found birth control pills in Sony's apartment and assaulted her again. The next morning, Sony called Pamela, asking for a ride to the hospital due to a miscarriage. By late 2008, at the age of 27, Sony was working at a Christian academy. She was a reliable employee who always arrived on time. Therefore, when she missed work or requested time off, it was usually for significant reasons. On one occasion, she called her employer to say she couldn't come in because her face was badly bruised and she didn't want the children to see her like that. Leslie granted her the day off. When Sony returned a few days later, her bruises were so severe that the director allowed her to wear sunglasses inside the academy. She confided in her boss about how her boyfriend had once chased her in his car, trying to force her off the road during the pursuit. Lakeith's violence wasn't limited to Sony and their children. In April 2008, he was found parked in an SUV with a firearm, despite being prohibited from possessing one as a convicted felon. He had already served 2 years in prison for theft and another 3 for drug possession with intent to sell. Despite Sony's efforts to distance herself from him, it was nearly impossible. The situation reached a critical point on October 6, 2008. That day, Sony did not show up at the academy. At 5 p.m., her boss received a text message from Sony stating that her boyfriend was holding her hostage in her own home and had been beating her all day. She then provided her address. The boss called the police, and 2 officers arrived at the residence. They knocked on the door, but it was locked from the inside and there was no response. They called the fire department, who broke down the door. When the officers entered, they saw Lakeith jumping out of an open window at the back of the apartment. Sony stood in a hallway, crying and unable to speak due to her distressed state. Her 4 children were with her, completing a heartbreaking scene. She was covered in bruises and scratches on her face and neck. Once she calmed down, Sony explained what had happened. She and Lakeith had started arguing and he refused to let her leave the house. She informed the officers that they didn't answer the door earlier because Lakeith wouldn't allow her or the children to go near it or the windows. She mentioned that Lakeith had hurt one of their children by grabbing him and had prevented her from taking him to the hospital. Sony detailed that her boyfriend had been physically and verbally abusing her, even tying a baby blanket around her neck and choking her until she lost consciousness. During the conflict, when the police arrived, Lakeith threatened to suffocate her again, promising that next time he would make sure to kill her. The officers searched the area but could not find Lakeith. Sony left the house with her children in her car. 3 days after this incident, she applied for a restraining order against Lakeith, fearing for her life and wanting to prevent any further contact with him. However, she missed the court hearing on October 23rd, and the protection order was never granted. Nearly 6 months later, on March 10, 2009, Sony was still in contact with Lakeith. That day, he was supposed to pick up the children for a doctor's appointment, but instead he started a fight with Sony, accusing her of having a new boyfriend. The argument quickly escalated as he slapped her and pulled her hair. She managed to break free and ran out of the apartment with Lakeith yelling death threats after her. Lakeith didn't catch her, but instead grabbed their youngest child, an infant, and drove off at high speed. A police patrol, alerted to the domestic disturbance, arrived just as Lakeith was fleeing. The officers attempted to stop him, but he evaded them and escaped. By early 2010, 28-year-old Sony was studying at Southeast Tennessee Community College. Her 5th child was 9 weeks old and in such fragile health that she had to stay home to care for him. In January, Lakeith, Sony, and their children moved together into the Budget Lodge Motel in Memphis. The very day they moved in, their arguments were so loud that the motel staff had to intervene because they were disturbing other guests. Peace was elusive. Their fights were constant, annoying the neighbors and the management with the noise. On January 22nd, the hotel security guard witnessed Lakeith in a highly agitated state. He arrived at high speed in Sony's car and began shouting at her while she stood on the second-floor balcony with the children. In the heat of the argument, he threw a bag of groceries at her. The guard approached and told him they couldn't make so much noise or throw objects and that they needed to finish the argument inside their room. Lakeith simply told him to mind his own business. He locked the car and walked away, with the guard following him to a third-floor room not registered under anyone's name. Later, the guard asked Lakeith to hand over any hotel keys he had, and to his surprise, Lakeith had keys to 3 different rooms despite not being registered as a guest. The next day, the troubled couple moved with their children to room 222. That evening, the night manager asked Lakeith to leave, and though he complied, he soon returned. The fights continued for a few more days until the same security guard, who had repeatedly warned them, asked Lakeith to leave the property for good. The receptionist tried to calm him down as he went to the parking lot, and the guard told him not to come back that night. Lakeith got into the car and drove away. On January 26th, Sony spoke with Pamela, confiding that many things were happening in her life and that she was staying at the motel. She expressed a desire to tell Pamela something important and said she would call if she left the motel or if her boyfriend left first. The next day started normally. At 7 a.m., Sony took her younger children to daycare and her eldest to school. Around 11 a.m., the housekeeping manager knocked on Sony's door, speaking to her through the window to inform her they needed to pay or leave. He returned several times that day. On one visit, around 2:30 p.m., Lakeith answered the door. The room was dark. Lakeith told the manager that his mother was on her way to bring the money. Later, the hotel security guard checked room 222 and found it empty. Children's clothes, bags, and various items were scattered on the floor and one of the beds, while the other bed was neatly made. That same day, January 27th, Sony failed to pick up her eldest daughter on time. The school secretary called Christine, the child's maternal grandmother, to come and get her. Christine tried calling Sony, but received no answer. Around 6 p.m., Christine discovered that her other grandchildren were still at daycare. Worried by the lack of response, she asked her husband to pick up the younger children from daycare while she went to the school. Convinced something was wrong, they contacted the police, who came to the house around 10:30 p.m. and filed a missing persons report. On January 28th, the housekeeping manager entered the now empty room 222 again. This time, he began cataloging and tagging the belongings left behind by the tenants who seemingly fled to avoid paying their bill. The room contained piles of clothes and a large garbage bag which were taken to the storage area. Once the room was emptied, it was cleaned and made available for new guests. The next occupants were James and Rhonda Sargent, who moved in on January 29th. The new tenants noticed a foul odor and tried to mask it with incense, but it wasn't enough. They also noticed that the previous occupants had attempted to do the same, as they found scented tissues in the tiles and ceiling vents. The smell was particularly strong when someone sat on the bed. On January 29th, officers from the Memphis Police Department's Missing Persons Unit visited the hotel to inquire about Sony's whereabouts, as it was the last place she had been seen. However, they did not enter room 222. Lakeith was found on February 2nd and around 7 p.m. inside Sony's car parked at a shopping center. He was arrested for vehicle theft and held in police custody for 48 hours. That night, he was questioned about Sony's disappearance. He claimed the last time he saw her was on January 26th. He explained that they met around 7 a.m. in the hotel parking lot after she returned from dropping off the children at school. They went into the room, were intimate, and then went back outside. He took Sony's car keys and left the hotel. Lakeith stated that Sony planned to use her social benefits and a school loan to buy a new car, so it wasn't a problem if he kept hers. He claimed he had been living in the car since January 26th. Investigators, however, discovered that he had actually been staying at another hotel. Additionally, it was unlikely he spent nights in the car due to the snow during that period. On February 3rd, a debit card with Sony's name and several recent purchase receipts were found inside the car. That same day, the police examined the clothes placed in storage at the hotel, hoping to find DNA or other evidence, but came up empty-handed. Adding to their frustrations, Lakeith had to be released due to insufficient evidence linking him to Sony's disappearance. Meanwhile, Sony's cousin and her mother endured the painful task of going to the hotel to collect Sony's belongings. Her cousin had a terrible premonition, but found nothing to support her feelings. On February 4th, the police visited Moody's uncle's house and found a DVD player from the hotel room in Sony's wallet. Moody had given these items to his cousin. The cousin told the police that Lakeith had borrowed the DVD player on January 24th, supposedly to watch a movie, and was driving a red car that day. A few days later, the cousin saw Lakeith again and asked why he hadn't picked up the children on January 27th, but Lakeith avoided the question. When he inquired about Sony's whereabouts, Lakeith left the DVD player and wallet in a bag and left the house. As the days passed, James and Rhonda Sargent requested to be moved from room 222 due to the persistent bad odor. With no other rooms available, they moved to another hotel. Subsequent guests in room 222 also complained about the foul smell. Despite numerous cleanings and a carpet wash in early February, the odor persisted, only slightly reduced for a few days. Sony's family, especially her children, were deeply affected by her absence. Their only hope was for Sony's safe return. On February 4th, homicide detectives visited the hotel. By then, the room had been occupied and cleaned at least 3 times. The detectives did not enter the room but asked the staff if they noticed anything unusual. All responded negatively. On February 7th, James and Rhonda returned to the hotel, changing rooms 3 times, including spending one night in room 222. The sergeants informed the management that the room still reeked of the unpleasant odor. In March, a more thorough cleaning was carried out, which included the carpets, bedding, bathroom curtains, and window drapes. To everyone's dismay, the smell not only persisted but intensified. The manager discussed the issue with the security guard, and during their conversation they recalled that the former tenant, Sony, had disappeared at the end of January. The guard remembered the events from that time and suggested that the manager inspect room 222 for blood or cleaning agents. 10 minutes later, the manager returned and asked the guard to accompany him. What they discovered was shocking. The 2 men entered the room, where the manager had removed the mattress from one of the beds, leaving only the frame. The lower part of the bed frame had a sort of enclosure that prevented using the space underneath as an unsightly storage area. However, lifting the box spring revealed a large empty space where anything could be hidden from view. Looking through the solid edges of the frame, they saw something unimaginable, a decomposing body. They called the police, who arrived at the scene shortly after. The bed frame had marks all over it, and there were 2 broken wooden areas. Near the head of the bed was a towel and a cloth bag between the legs of the body, which was wearing a shirt but was naked from the waist down. The forensic team's autopsy determined that the cause of death was strangulation with a coaxial cable. The cable was wrapped around the neck, went under one arm, around the chest, and ended at the back. The forensic examiner concluded that it would have taken at least 2 to 3 minutes of continuous pressure to cause death. DNA samples matched Sony's genetic profile and female markers. Male genetic material was also found on 5 parts of the cable. The main hypothesis was that Sony had already been dead when she was reported missing, and that Lakeith had used the coaxial cable from the DVD player he had borrowed from his cousin, indicating premeditation. Lakeith was found and detained by the police shortly after, not for the discovery of Sony's body but on a different charge, possessing a firearm despite a prior felony conviction. Nonetheless, at the time of his arrest, he was considered a person of interest since he was the last person seen with Sony alive. Additionally, he was again in Sony's car when he was arrested and sent to the detention facility in Mason. On March 18th, the police announced an internal investigation to determine how the case had unfolded so strangely. He stated that the family deserved answers and explained that, while the officers were eager to resolve the case, they had pursued a different path that led away from the room. They also stated that they had ever encountered anything like this, noting that the discovery surpassed fiction and highlighting the drama of domestic violence. He regretted that the room had been cleaned and rented multiple times since Sony's death, complicating the police's evidence collection efforts. This explanation was met with skepticism. Shortly after, Rhonda, one of the first tenants to stay in the room where Sony's body was found, spoke to the media. She mentioned that if the officers had asked to enter the room during their January visit, they would have been allowed. She reasoned that, unlike her and her husband, the officers should have recognized the smell of a decomposing body and found Sony much earlier. Finally, the time came to give Sony a loving and dignified farewell. Her funeral was held on March 24th. Sony's children were placed under the care of her sister and her husband. By April 1st, they were making efforts to obtain legal guardianship of the children. She stated that while the children were the primary victims, the lives of everyone in the family were disrupted by the tragic loss. She expressed that while she couldn't bring her sister back, she was determined to care for Sony's children, ensuring they had food, clothing, and toys and keeping them together as a family. Sony had been a beneficiary of a social program that periodically credited funds to a card for grocery purchases. The card had been loaded shortly before the crime, as part of a tax refund on her income. The police tracked the movements of this card, which was found in Lakeith's possession. This effort proved successful, revealing that the card had been used on February 1st, 4 days after Sony's disappearance, at a convenience store. Sony usually visited the store on the 1st of each month to withdraw cash using her electronic benefit transfer card. Officers went to the store and asked the owner for access to the footage from their 16 security cameras on the morning of February 1st. At 11:38, the surveillance system captured a man in yellow using Sony's card to buy a bottle of orange juice, withdraw some cash, and purchase a cigar. After making the purchases, he returned to a car driven by another person. With all the evidence against him, the trial for Lakeith began in the first week of February 2014, over 4 years after the crime. By then, the Budget Lodge Hotel had closed. Lakeith pleaded not guilty, while the prosecutor described the situation as a very ugly and tragic end to a tumultuous relationship. In contrast, the defense attorney emphasized the lack of conclusive evidence, including witnesses or material proof. He argued that there was no evidence of premeditation, only the prosecution's speculations. He pointed out that the police had found a fingerprint on the bed frame that did not match Lakeith's. He suggested that someone else might have killed Sony, as she had been involved with other men over the years. He insisted that his client had never been arrested for domestic violence against her. Additionally, he revealed something that had not been public knowledge. Sony had moved in with Lakeith again because she had to leave a relative's house due to a rat infestation. On February 6th, the video showing Lakeith using Sony's prepaid card 4 days after her death was presented in court. The defense claimed his calm demeanor during the transaction indicated innocence, while the prosecution saw it as evidence of a cold-blooded and ruthless man unbothered by the crime he had allegedly committed. On February 7, 2014, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and was automatically sentenced to life in prison on February 10th. He appealed the sentence, arguing that the court had erred in considering past domestic violence acts and that the evidence was insufficient. On July 7, 2015, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction, confirming the sentences. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Obviously, the one question is, everybody's asked me, why? I understand why Casey, why the boys, why your daughter.
Michael Wayne Jones was born on May 1, 1981, in the small town of Brattleboro, situated in Vermont, USA. While the identities of his parents remain unknown, it is evident that his family life was fraught with complexity and difficulty. From a tender age, Michael was a witness to the repeated physical and mental abuse between his parents, and he too was a victim of this mistreatment. These issues seem to be a tragic and enduring legacy, affecting both sides of his family. During Michael's early years, his father was incarcerated for reasons that are still unclear. This event deeply affected Michael, creating a profound sense of emptiness in his life. Seeking a fresh start, his mother remarried and had another son named Dana. Michael found some joy in having a sibling, but their home life remained far from ideal. His stepfather's inability to maintain steady employment placed the entire financial burden on his mother, who was forced to take on 2 jobs. Compounding their difficulties, Michael's stepfather exhibited aggressive behavior toward both him and Dana. The use of violent disciplinary methods created an environment of fear and oppression. If Michael arrived late to school or made a mistake, he was harshly punished, often locked in a shed and subjected to sexual abuse. Despite the harshness of his life, Michael showed a generous and protective nature. In such dire circumstances, he often took on the role of protecting Dana, sometimes enduring punishments meant for his brother to spare him the pain. This courageous and loving behavior forged a strong bond between the brothers, with Michael becoming a figure of admiration for Dana. The stepfather's control was so stringent that Michael was rarely allowed to interact with other children from school or the neighborhood. His mother, living in fear of her husband, was unable to confront or oppose him. This created an atmosphere of isolation, secrecy, and oppression within the household. Without any external support, Michael and Dana had to endure the ongoing abuse. The bleak atmosphere of their home did not go unnoticed by the neighbors, who began to suspect the presence of abuse. On one occasion, driven by desperation, Michael ran away from home. But Michael had no clear destination, so he was eventually found by the authorities. When questioned about his reasons for leaving, he shared the difficult story of his family life. However, he received no assistance regarding his situation. Despite his efforts to appear fine to those around him, Michael's true feelings were hidden beneath the surface. As he entered adolescence, his low self-esteem significantly affected him, leading to a depression that required medical treatment. The only respite from his pain was his high school. There, despite his introversion and loneliness, Michael felt somewhat at ease as responsibilities helped him forget his oppressive home life. He was fortunate to meet Dorothy, who owned a nearby business. She introduced him to her daughter, whose name remains unknown. Michael formed a friendship with the girl, which eventually turned into an on-and-off relationship. This special connection allowed Michael to reveal a kind, affectionate, and protective side of himself. Dorothy was delighted by this new facet of Michael, but was also concerned. He always seemed on edge when it was time to go home. Although Dorothy's daughter often visited him, Michael did everything he could to keep her away from his house. With so many signs, Dorothy finally decided to delve deeper in her conversations with Michael. He then confided in her about his constant worry for his mother and brother's well-being. This allowed her to glimpse the emotional burden and anguish he carried. Their friendship provided Michael with a temporary respite from his difficulties, a space where he could express his feelings. After high school, Michael made a life-changing decision by joining the United States Navy. This marked the beginning of a new chapter, providing him with a clear purpose within a highly structured environment. As he developed a deep love and attachment for the Navy, Michael realized how right his choice had been. This sense of well-being was largely due to the new friendships he formed with his fellow servicemen. Despite occasionally drinking, he always showed up for work and proved to be a calm and relaxed individual. At the time, Michael was dating a fellow service member, whose name has been kept confidential. However, it became clear that the relationship was imbalanced, as she was physically abusive. This revived old shadows of his family environment. When his relapse into depression became evident, he decided to leave her. He then focused on excelling in his career, which included undergoing additional training to provide medical care in combat situations. This earned him an assignment with the Marines in a medical role. During this period, Michael met a young woman named Sarah. They fell in love and eventually got married. Following their marriage, Michael left the Marines to focus on his new role as a husband. Sarah played a crucial role in Michael's life, helping to keep him on the right path. Together, they welcomed 3 children, and Michael dedicated himself to being a good father, always striving to provide them with the best upbringing possible. Although Sarah took the lead in many decisions, Michael consistently supported her choices. Around 2011, Sarah found a job in Central Florida, specifically in Orange County, and the family relocated there. She worked at Mount Dora Animal Hospital, managed by Beau Delaporte. As weeks went by and Michael struggled to find a job, Sarah persuaded Beau to hire him, recognizing his work experience. Michael quickly adapted to his new responsibilities and demonstrated remarkable dedication. He always exuded joy, and it was evident to everyone that he loved his work, caring for animals and attending to their owners. His positive attitude made him highly sought after, with pet owners preferring his services. His employers grew very fond of him, especially Beau, who, beyond their professional relationship, extended his friendship and trust to Michael. Beau even began to delegate some management responsibilities of the animal hospital to him. Everything was going smoothly, and in 2014, Beau hired a new veterinary technician, Casey. Born on December 23, 1986, in the city of Ossian, Indiana, Casey was the second daughter of Nickley and David. Her siblings were Sarah and Brandy. From a young age, Casey was undoubtedly the heart of her home, her overflowing energy lifting everyone's spirits, even beyond her family. As she grew, Casey showed great love for others, driven by a special connection to her spirituality. No matter the challenges, her strength lay in her faith and personal values. During her time at high school, Casey met Richard. Initially, their attraction was mutual. However, after dating for a few weeks, Richard began to notice certain behaviors in her. Despite her kind side, Casey also exhibited jealousy and possessiveness. Her insecurity led to an abusive side, expressed through words and actions. Nonetheless, Richard persisted, and with patience and calm, they married after completing their studies. Over time, Casey's mother decided to move to Florida, and shortly after, Sarah and Brandy followed her. Given Casey's close relationship with her family, she and Richard also relocated to the same state in 2009. As they settled in, Casey found occasional jobs as a transporter and sometimes worked as a dog groomer while learning the trade of a veterinary technician. During this period, the couple welcomed their first child, Cameron, and their happiness was evident. Cassie showed immense maternal devotion, making Cameron's well-being her top priority. A few years later, their joy grew even more with the birth of their second child, Preston. The children thrived in an ideal environment, filled with laughter and the loving care of their parents. As Casey advanced in her veterinary technician career, she found a job at an animal clinic where she met Michael, who had become Beau's right-hand man. From the beginning, Michael and Casey got along exceptionally well, but Beau and his wife sensed that their apparent friendship hinted at something more. This attraction, despite being inappropriate given the circumstances, was undeniable for Michael, even at the risk of being discovered by Sarah. The inappropriate attraction affected Michael's focus at work, leading to a decline in his performance, although he was always eager to meet Casey's needs and requests. She reciprocated his attention, and it wasn't long before they embarked on an affair. Eventually, both decided to divorce their respective spouses. Sarah gained custody of their 3 children and moved to Jacksonville, while Casey and Richard agreed on shared custody with fixed schedules that Casey strictly adhered to. She took responsibility for transporting Cameron and Preston, diligently fulfilling her parental duties. Meanwhile, Beau grew increasingly frustrated with Michael's declining performance. Additionally, Michael made inappropriate advances toward other clinic employees. When Michael requested leave to travel to his hometown, claiming his mother's death, Beau later discovered it was a ruse for a beach vacation. This betrayal led Beau to terminate Michael's employment. In retaliation, Michael broke into the clinic, stealing money, computer equipment, and even a weapon. Beau identified Michael as the culprit and reported him to the police. With Casey's help, Michael fled to New Mexico but was eventually captured and brought to justice. However, after a brief stint in prison, he was released. Despite everything, Casey's trust in Michael remained unshaken. They soon moved in together, and Michael took on the role of stepfather to Cameron and Preston. By 2017, around Halloween, Michael and Casey finally tied the knot and moved into a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom trailer. Despite the limited space, the modest rent made them feel fortunate to have each other. That same year, they welcomed their first daughter, Mercali, followed by Ayana the next year. While Michael worked as a construction laborer to support their 4 children, Casey took pride in her role as a homemaker. She cherished every stage of her children's growth and sought ways to preserve those unique moments. This led her to create a YouTube channel to share special milestones of their family. On the surface, their life seemed idyllic, with Michael exuding calmness and Casey's laughter often heard in the background of their videos. However, behind closed doors, the couple frequently clashed, and their arguments had become a constant issue. Distrustful of Michael, Casey made a habit of checking his phone. She also grew suspicious whenever he worked long hours. On the night of July 10, 2019, while the children slept, a heated argument erupted between them. The trigger was Casey's discovery of a supposed infidelity on Michael's phone. The confrontation quickly escalated from verbal to physical. In a fit of rage, Casey grabbed a baseball bat and shoved Michael with it. Overcome with anger, Michael managed to wrest the bat from her and, in a blind fury, struck her repeatedly, ultimately killing her. Michael then placed Casey's body in a plastic bag and stored it in a closet. He attempted to clean up the scene as best as he could. The next morning, he decided to take further steps to avoid the children discovering what had happened. He loaded her remains into his car. In the following days, to avoid suspicion, Michael continued to share content on Casey's social media accounts. On July 26th, pretending to be Casey, he texted Richard asking him to take care of Preston and Cameron. He did the same with Casey's mother, instructing her to look after Mercali and Ayana. When Richard came to pick up Cameron and Preston, He found Casey's absence strange and voiced his concerns to Michael, who brushed it off, saying she had left town for a few days. Casey's mother had a similar reaction when she came for Mercalli and Ayanna. That same day, Michael called Sarah, telling her that he was separating from Casey and needed to see his children while she worked. Later, he picked them up and took them to his residence. During the drive, the children noticed a foul odor in the car, similar to rotting meat. For 2 weeks, Michael continued to drive between his home and Sarah's residence to visit his children, all while Casey's lifeless body remained in the car. As days passed without any word from her daughter, Casey's mother began to sense that something was wrong. On August 10th, Richard returned Cameron and Preston to Michael, and this time, Casey's absence caused him much greater concern. During their brief conversation, Michael apologized for being the cause of their divorce and acknowledged the challenges Richard had faced during his time with Casey. As the new school year approached, Michael realized that the absence of the children and Casey would raise questions from the elementary school staff. One night, on an unspecified date, he dragged Cameron out of bed and suffocated him, then placed his body in a suitcase. The next morning, he did the same with Preston, this time putting the body in a garbage bag. A few days later, the trailer park owner served Michael an eviction notice, giving him a maximum of 2 weeks to leave. Amid this grim situation, Michael went to pick up Mercalli and Ayanna. When Casey's mother saw him again, still without Casey, she had a nervous breakdown. Her mind was fixated on one question: where was her daughter? As Michael drove with the girls, he was suddenly overwhelmed with guilt. He felt he had no choice but to turn himself in at a police station. However, after lingering at the entrance for a while, he changed his mind and drove back home. Once there, he filled the bathtub with water and drowned Mercalli and Ayanna. After they stopped breathing, he placed their bodies in a plastic container. By early September, the approach of Hurricane Orion led to a state of emergency being declared in Florida. Many sought refuge in public shelters to protect themselves from the impending disaster. This situation provided Michael an opportunity to flee with the 5 bodies. He loaded them into his truck and drove north, planning to stay with Sarah and his children. Despite the ongoing emergency in Florida, Sarah never saw Michael call his wife or inquire about the children. This made her uneasy, but aware of the marital issues, she chose not to ask questions. After the hurricane passed, Michael's neighbors reported a foul smell coming from the trailer to the property owner. Assuming the Jones family had already left, the owner first peeked through the windows and then entered the trailer. Aside from the furniture and personal belongings, nothing seemed amiss, but the stench was unbearable. By this time, Casey's, desperate to find an explanation for her daughter's absence, speculated that Michael might be in trouble with the law again and was hiding. She concluded that her daughter might be in hiding for safety reasons, but instead of staying idle, she contacted the sheriff's office to request a welfare check on Casey. When the officers conducted the welfare check, they found the house empty and seemingly recently cleaned. However, the presence of cleaning supplies near the door contrasted with the persistent smell of decomposition. Despite this, the property owner arrived and asked the officers to leave. Meanwhile, with the body still in his vehicle, Michael left Sarah's house and drove across the state border into Georgia. There, near a wooded area, he disposed of Cameron, Preston, Mercalli, and Ayanna. While driving on the highway and checking his GPS, Michael lost control of his vehicle and crashed. Surprisingly, he emerged unscathed, but the vehicle was completely wrecked. Police officers quickly arrived at the scene and immediately noticed the terrible odor coming from the truck. When they opened the suitcase, they were met with a horrifying sight: Casey's remains. There, on the roadside and under the shocked gaze of the authorities, Michael confessed in detail to his gruesome actions, including the location of the children. Consequently, he was taken into custody. Upon hearing the news, Casey's family felt as though their world had collapsed. In a state of shock, they could not stop asking themselves how a human being could inflict so much harm on others, especially on babies. For the first time in her life, Sarah experienced hatred towards someone, as she later stated. However, the thought that Casey might have witnessed her children's deaths caused her the most pain. Based on the findings and armed with a search warrant, the agents returned to Casey's residence. Upon entering, besides the smell, they noticed a reddish stain on the carpet. They prepared to collect evidence at the scene. Meanwhile, the autopsies were being performed. According to the forensic report, Cameron had a fractured jaw but no other visible signs of trauma. However, a towel was found in his mouth. Preston had a noose around his neck. Mercalli and Ayanna were found together in a small plastic bag containing a baby bottle labeled Ayanna and a pair of pink sandals. Both had died by drowning. As for Casey, there was crushing on the front of her skull and face, indicating a blow with a blunt object, but no other traumas were found on her body. Michael agreed to be interviewed by the officers, and during the process he remained calm and precise in his responses, making no attempt to deceive the agents. On the contrary, Michael thanked the officers for capturing him, stating that there was nothing more he could do given the circumstances. Calmly, he then recounted the events chronologically, from the night of the fight with Casey to his subsequent arrest. When asked about the motive behind his actions, Michael responded that everything had accumulated in his life to the point where it seemed like the best and only way out. Beyond the logical impact of such a tragedy on everyone involved, it was particularly hard and cruel for Sarah to accept that her own children had been exposed to and lived with a man like Michael. Understandably, after learning the facts, Sarah suffered from mental health issues. Michael was charged with second-degree murder for Casey's death and 4 additional counts of first-degree premeditated murder for the deaths of the children. He pleaded guilty. This plea avoided a trial, moving the case directly to the sentencing phase. In this phase, a jury of 12 people had to decide between life imprisonment or the death penalty. As part of their strategy, the defense focused on Michael's difficult childhood and his mental health issues, presenting various psychological disorders as mitigating factors. However, the state prosecutors argued that the undeniable brutality of the case warranted the death penalty. In January 2023, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty in accordance with state law. During a brief 9-minute hearing, the judge sentenced Michael for his crimes. Additionally, he was given life without parole for Casey's murder. Michael's lawyer immediately filed the necessary paperwork to appeal the sentence. Despite this last effort on Friday, April 28, 2023, the judge upheld the previous sentence. Prosecutors expressed their satisfaction with the justice served for the victims' families. As he awaits execution, Michael remains behind bars. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Before the summer of 1988, the Carr family led an idyllic life in the small town of Alturas. Known for their unwavering faith, they attended church every Sunday and were the epitome of a peaceful, trouble-free family. However, this serene existence was shattered on June 14th when 16-year-old Dwayne discovered a menacing letter in their mailbox. The anonymous note was stark and terrifying, demanding the family leave Florida or face deadly consequences. Understandably shaken, Dwayne rushed to show his parents. His mother, Peggy, was immediately gripped by fear, while her husband, Lynn, dismissed it as a cruel joke. As summer turned to fall, the family's unease grew, culminating on October 23rd. Peggy suddenly fell gravely ill, plagued by severe nausea and excruciating pain. Her once vibrant hair began to fall out in alarming amounts. Despite the worsening symptoms, Lynn refused to take Peggy to the hospital, believing it was just a passing illness. But Peggy's condition rapidly declined. Within a week, she slipped into a coma. To the family's horror, Dwayne soon began exhibiting the same symptoms as his mother. The situation reached a critical point, prompting a police investigation. On December 2nd, authorities uncovered a shocking revelation. The family's sickness was caused by thallium, a lethal chemical commonly found in rat poison. Tests confirmed that every member of the Carr family, including Lynn, had dangerously high levels of this poison in their systems. As the investigation deepened, the chilling realization set in. Someone was systematically targeting the Carr family. The letter was no prank. It was a harbinger of the terror to come. The race was now on to identify the perpetrator and stop them before they could strike again. The year was 1988. 16-year-old Dwayne lived a blissful life with his family in the serene town of Alturas, Florida. His mother, Peggy, worked tirelessly as a waitress at the local diner. After raising 3 children on her own, Peggy finally found love with Lynn Carr, who brought 2 more children into their blended family. Their life in Alturas seemed perfect. A quiet town where no one locked their doors, an ideal place to raise a family. But on October 23rd, their lives took a tragic turn. In the early hours, Peggy left for work as usual. However, soon after arriving at the diner, she began to feel a burning sensation in her legs and feet, followed by intense chest pain. She was rushed to the hospital, almost incapacitated. Despite thorough testing, doctors couldn't pinpoint the cause of her illness and sent her home with pain medication. A week later, on October 30th, the nightmare escalated. Peggy, Dwayne, and his stepbrother Travis were all rushed to the hospital with identical symptoms. The pain was unbearable, leaving them in tears thinking they were going to die. Peggy was admitted to the intensive care unit. An infectious disease specialist noticed something alarming. Peggy's hair was falling out in clumps, a sign that pointed to possible poisoning. He decided to test for thallium, a deadly poison banned in the U.S. in 1972, but still present in old rat poison. The test results were horrifying. Peggy had 50 times the lethal amount of thallium in her system. The next day, October 31st, she fell into a coma. Travis was put on a respirator and Dwayne showed no signs of improvement. The police launched an urgent investigation. Their goal was clear: find the source of the poisoning to prevent further harm. They scoured the orange groves, tested the neighborhood water supply, and even examined the diner where Peggy worked. Yet, no traces of thallium were found. As news spread, panic gripped the community. People demanded answers, fearing for their own safety. Investigators descended upon the Carr home, meticulously collecting dust samples and gathering over 400 household items for lab analysis. One of these items raised alarm bells: a six-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of which remained unopened. Tests revealed that each contained more than a gram of thallium, enough to kill an adult. The detective in charge quickly realized there were only 2 possible scenarios. The first involved product tampering at the Coke factory. If that were the case, how many more people might have consumed the poison? The potential spread could reach far beyond the county, possibly affecting the entire state or even the nation. Fear spread rapidly, with locals terrified to drink Coke. The investigation's initial focus was on the bottling company. However, with Coca-Cola's cooperation, large-scale tampering was swiftly ruled out. It was deemed physically impossible to tamper with the product at the plant. This left the police with only one conclusion. This was a targeted attack on Peggy Carr and her family. The investigation turned inward, examining family members closely. Peggy's husband, Periellen Carr, emerged as a primary suspect. Despite being married for only 7 months, the couple's honeymoon period had been short-lived. Periellen worked long hours at the mine, and Peggy had grown suspicious. One night, she discovered him with another woman. Adding to the suspicion, the weekend Peggy first fell ill, Periellen was conveniently out of town. Upon his return, he resisted taking her to the hospital. As investigators delved deeper into Periellen's background, they sought any motive that might explain why he would poison his wife. Despite his troubling behavior, one question nagged at the police: why would Periellen poison his own son, Travis? During interrogation, Periellen revealed a puzzling clue. On June 14th, 4 months before Peggy fell ill, Dwayne found a letter in the mailbox. The letter contained a yellow post-it with a threatening typewritten note, warning the family to leave Florida within 2 weeks or face death. Dwayne and his siblings initially laughed it off, but Periellen's dismissive attitude now seemed more suspicious. The police later learned that this was not the first ominous incident in the Carr household. A few years prior, 2 of their dogs had died suddenly, both exhibiting symptoms of severe illness and hair loss. This led to a chilling suspicion: they might have been used for experimentation. As Peggy's health continued to deteriorate and Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of improvement, the entire family underwent testing for thallium. The results were far more alarming than anyone anticipated. Every member of the household, including Periellen Carr, had traces of thallium in their system. This revelation cleared Periellen as a suspect, as it seemed implausible that someone with the knowledge to commit such a crime would risk ingesting the poison themselves. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, had traces of thallium. On March 3, 1989, after 5 months of suffering, Peggy's condition reached its tragic conclusion. Dwayne was called to her bedside for the final time as the family faced the heartbreaking decision to remove her from life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving the family devastated. With Peggy's death, the investigation took a new turn. It was now a murder case. Poisoning someone is a rare and calculated method of murder, often devised by a demented yet brilliant mind. The FBI's examination of the contaminated Coke bottles revealed tiny scratch marks, indicating they had been meticulously tampered with. The thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles appeared untouched. Thallium, being tasteless and odorless, dissolves easily but usually causes noticeable changes in soda. However, the mixture found in the Coke bottles was sophisticated, avoiding typical signs like overflow, discoloration, or sediment. This pointed to the work of someone with advanced knowledge of chemistry, a highly intelligent individual who believed they were smarter than everyone else. Police began questioning neighbors and townspeople. Alturas, a small community of a few hundred residents, saw every single person interviewed as investigators sought to uncover the perpetrator behind this heinous act. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George Trepal and his wife, Diana. When the detectives questioned Trepal, his reaction was shockingly harsh. Trepal launched into a tirade about the redneck children and family living next to him. When asked why anyone would want to poison the Carr family, Trepal's response was unsettlingly specific. Someone wanted them to leave. This echoed the exact message in the threatening letter received by the Carrs, a detail only known to law enforcement. This peculiar response made Trepal a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that George Trepal was a self-taught chemist, while his wife Diana held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were members of an elite society for individuals with IQs in the top 2% of the population. Digging deeper, investigators discovered Trepal had a criminal background. He had served time in prison for being the chemist in a major methamphetamine operation. One of the ingredients commonly used in producing methamphetamine is thallium. The spotlight on George Trepal as a person of interest shocked even Peggy's son, Dwayne, who couldn't believe Trepal was capable of such a heinous act. The detectives uncovered that Trepal had previously had a confrontation with the Carr family over loud music. Just 48 hours after this argument, Peggy Carr was poisoned. Despite these connections, the police lacked concrete proof to arrest Trepal. Standard police procedure often involves bringing a suspect in for questioning, hoping for a confession. However, detectives believed this approach wouldn't work with Trepal, an introverted and non-confrontational individual. Instead, the FBI proposed a different strategy. Someone had to go undercover to outsmart Trepal. The police assigned Special Agent Susan Gorick to infiltrate the group to which George Trepal belonged. The aim was to gain Trepal's trust and gather enough evidence to prove his involvement in the poisoning. Initially, it seemed that Detective Susan Gorick would only need to go undercover for a weekend. However, she was warned about Trepal's photographic memory. If he saw them, he could remember their cars or faces. Under an assumed identity, Susan prepared to attend a murder mystery gathering hosted by George Trepal and his wife, Diana. Susan Gorick transformed into a woman on the verge of divorcing an abusive husband. On April 14, 1989, she headed to the local hotel where the event was being held. Upon arrival, she was greeted by none other than George Trepal himself. Face to face with the suspected killer, Susan's biggest fear was that Trepal might recognize her from previous surveillance operations. She took a deep breath, searching for any sign of recognition in his eyes, but Trepal didn't seem to recognize her. Nevertheless, Susan had to remain vigilant. In her undercover role, Susan knew Trepal was not the type to confront directly. He was the kind who would poison his victims, causing a slow and painful death. The risk was immense. Introducing herself as Sherry Gwynn, she registered for the event and received a packet containing the weekend's information, prepared by Trepal himself. The pamphlet detailed several well-planned murder scenarios, one of which involved poisoning. One paragraph in particular stood out. It mentioned that when a death threat appears on the doorstep, prudent people throw out all their food and watch what they eat. The message was strikingly similar to the one the Carr family had received before Peggy was poisoned. This eerie similarity convinced Susan she had the right suspect. Throughout the weekend, Susan engaged Trapal in conversation, carefully watching every word he said, knowing one slip could cost her life. When Trapal asked about her background, Susan mentioned her fictional husband, a lawyer from Houston, Texas, and how she had left him. Trapal shared how he could tell when someone was lying by the way their neck muscles moved, making Susan even more nervous. Before the weekend ended, she confided in Trapal that she intended to move to Florida to escape her husband. This revelation led to a crucial breakthrough. Trapal mentioned that he and his wife were considering moving her practice and selling their house. After consulting with her supervisors, Detective Susan was instructed to continue her undercover operation beyond the initial weekend. Susan knew this extended mission was her chance to find crucial evidence that could secure a search warrant for Trapal's house. She hoped to discover lab equipment or chemicals that would link Trapal to the crime. The following week, Susan visited Trapal's house. During the tour, Trapal mentioned how safe Alturas was, boasting that no one locked their doors. Although Susan noticed several suspicious items, including a secret passageway in the library and a mannequin with bondage gear, none were sufficient for a search warrant. Despite the failed plan, Susan maintained her Sherry Gwynn persona, determined to gather more evidence. She was acutely aware of the risks. Exposing her true identity could lead to her and her family's harm. Trapal, a highly intelligent individual, could easily resort to poisoning her if he discovered she was an undercover detective. Over the next several months, Susan met with Trapal for a series of lunch dates, always under surveillance. She never ate or drank anything after leaving the table, wary of Trapal's potential to harm her. During these meetings, Trapal gradually revealed his disdain for people he considered less intelligent, giving Susan insights into his mindset. After 8 months, Susan had collected numerous small pieces of evidence, but not enough to build a solid case. Her supervisors began to question the operation's value, threatening to shut it down. To Susan, failure was not an option. She was driven by the need to secure justice for Peggy Carr and her family, imagining how it could have been her own loved ones who drank the poison. In December 1989, Susan received the breakthrough call she had been waiting for. George and Diana Trapal had moved out of town and offered Sherry Gwynn the chance to move into their home. Without needing a warrant, Susan now had legal permission to enter the house and invite the county crime scene unit to investigate. Believing Trapal was too clever to leave obvious traces of thallium, the team focused on finding residue in places like the air conditioning filter or drains. The house was still filled with Trapal's belongings, providing ample opportunities for collecting samples. In the garage of George Trapal's house, investigators collected vials and chemistry bottles, hoping one would test positive for thallium. As they awaited results from the FBI lab, Susan continued her role as Sherry Gwynn, even as ideas and scenarios to engage Trapal ran thin. Time was running out. By January 1990, with no news from the lab, Susan knew she had to take action. She decided to try and trick Trapal into incriminating himself, unaware that Trapal was also preparing a trap for her. Susan arranged a meeting with Trapal at a picnic area behind a McDonald's in Sebring, the town where he was living. This critical meeting was recorded on tape. During their conversation, Susan handed Trapal a business card claiming it was left by detectives searching for him. Trapal's behavior changed noticeably. He became extremely nervous. His agitation was palpable as he tried to maintain composure. He repeatedly asked Susan to come over to his new house, which she declined. The tension was high. What might have happened if she had agreed to visit his home? After the meeting, Trapal walked away visibly shaken, his nerves clearly frayed by the news Susan had shared. This encounter marked a turning point. On April 4, 1990, Susan received an unexpected call. The FBI had found thallium in one of the vials collected from Trapal's garage. Specifically, it contained thallium nitrate, the exact compound used in the poisoning of Peggy Carr and the attempted murder of her entire family. This discovery was the crucial piece of evidence needed to solidify the case against Trapal. The following day, April 5th, George Trapal was arrested at his new home in Sebring. The sight of Trapal being escorted in an orange jumpsuit into the county jail marked the end of a long and dangerous investigation. The same man Susan had to trust during her undercover mission was now facing justice for his crimes. Even when confronted with the truth about her identity, George Trapal remained unfazed. Susan, now revealing herself as S. Special Agent from the county sheriff's office, served him with a warrant for handwriting samples. Trapal simply smiled and responded, "Oh, okay." Unbeknownst to Susan, she had narrowly escaped becoming Trapal's next victim. When police searched Trapal's home in Sebring, they made a shocking discovery. Behind a pegboard, they found a hidden room with no inside door handle and a sealed, soundproof window. Inside, there was a platform bed equipped with wooden stirrups and a pulley system designed to lift people. Trapal had been constructing a bed for torture. The realization of what could have happened if she had visited his home was horrifying for Susan. In January 1991, as George Trapal's trial began, the jury was presented with overwhelming evidence. Among the items collected from Trapal's house was a journal titled General Poisoning Guides, which described thallium as the poison of choice for criminals. The journal contained references to getting rid of neighbors, and 55 fingerprints in the journal matched Trapal's. The prosecution also showcased the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles. A set of tiny screwdrivers, one of which was missing, perfectly matched the tool marks on the bottle caps. This damning evidence shocked the jury. Throughout the trial, Trapal remained calm and emotionless, sometimes even smiling. His lack of remorse and his calculated actions demonstrated a chilling level of evil. He had justified his heinous acts with his belief in his superior intelligence and the idea that those less intelligent did not deserve to live. The trial lasted 2 months, but it only took the jury 4 hours to reach a verdict. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's death, George Trapal was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. The final sentence was delivered with gravitas. The defendant, George James Trapal, shall be electrocuted until he is dead. With these words, justice was served for Peggy Carr. Special Agent Susan's relentless dedication and bravery brought a criminal mastermind to justice. She risked everything, putting her life on the line to ensure Trapal faced the consequences of his heinous actions. Reflecting on Susan's efforts, one cannot help but admire her courage. She went above and beyond to bring Peggy's killer to justice, earning the respect and gratitude of many. The rest of Peggy Carr's family, who were also poisoned, made full recoveries. However, the loss of Peggy had a profound impact on her son, Dwayne. Losing his mother at the tender age of 16 was a traumatic experience that left deep emotional scars. In the years following her death, Dwayne struggled with grief, often expressing it through anger and outbursts. Eventually, Dwayne found solace in writing to his mother. In a heartfelt letter, he poured out his emotions. "Dear Mom, this is your baby boy. I'd like to tell you that I love you and I'm sorry for all the bad things I've ever done to you. Hopefully, you're in a better place now. I often think about you and wish you were here. I haven't been so good and I'm sorry. I'll try to get my life straight." Dwayne made good on his promise. Today, he is married and has become the father figure his own family deserves. Every day, he strives to make his mother proud and keep her memory alive. Dwayne Dauberly stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, showing that even after unimaginable tragedy, a life worth living is possible. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.